Good afternoon. I'll be presenting on behalf of Medicine 3. This is a story of Mr. S, who was a 54-year-old man from Jharkhand who worked as a fitter at a coal mine. He presented with exertional dyspnea for the past 4 years. His baseline effort tolerance was 2 kilometers, which has slowly progressed to dyspnea at rest over the past 6 months. Abdominal distension, which was painless, progressive, slowly progressive over the past 4 years and worsened over the past 6 months, and bilateral painless pitting edema up to the mid calf. He was a known diabetic for the past 10 years on regular oral antidiabetic medications and occasional use of native medications in the past for the same complaints. There was no history of TB in the past or ATT use. He consumed a mixed diet and he did not have any addictions. So on examination, he was afebrile. Heart rate was 104 per minute in the right radial artery, and it was regular. BP was 110/60 millimeters in the right arm in supine position. No pulsus paradoxus was present. Respiratory rate was 18 per minute. There was no pallor or clubbing. Bilateral pedal edema was present, which was pitting in nature, and a left axillary lymph node, which was a single lymph node, 2 into 2 centimeter firm mobile lymph node was present, along with acral hyperpigmentation. Um, this is the video visible to everyone? Would anyone like to describe what is shown? It's a presentation. Okay, so on CVS examination, he had distended neck veins with elevated JVP measured in the video. The apex was palpated in the left sixth intercostal space, 1 centimeter lateral to the midclavicular line. The first and the second heart sounds were muffled, and a pericardial knock was heard at the apex. On respiratory system examination, the trachea was central in position. Absent breath sounds in the right axillary, scapular, and interscapular areas, and bronchial breath sounds with egophony were heard in the right infrascapular area. Per abdominal examination was soft, flank dullness was present, and the spleen tip was palpable. CNS examination did not show any focal neurological deficits. So summarizing, he's a 54-year-old man with 10 years history of diabetes who presented with 4 years history of exertional dyspnea, abdominal distension, and pedal edema, which worsened over the past 6 months. With a clinical diagnosis of a constrictive pericarditis and a right-sided pleural effusion, the etiological differentials considered here would be a disseminated TB or a malignancy. Now, just to note on constrictive pericarditis, it is a form of diastolic heart failure caused by an inelastic pericardium that inhibits cardiac filling. And the most common cause of constrictive pericarditis is tuberculosis. Other causes would include a rheumatological disease, infection, malignancy, or prior cardiac surgery, post a prior history of irradiation, or prior history of acute pericarditis, etiology mostly being viral. So just a note on the pathophysiology of the findings that we see in constrictive pericarditis. So the normal pericardium minimally impedes the ventricular distensibility at normal cardiac operating volumes. In constrictive pericarditis, when the pericardium is fibrotic, thickened, and calcified, this pericardium and the ventricle function as one stiff unit, leading to limited ventricular relaxation. This limited ventricular relaxation leads to increase in the diastolic pressure, which in turn leads to a more rapid rise in the predominantly the right ventricular pressure for a given venous return. And under normal conditions, the pericardium has not much effect on the hemodynamics, and changes in the intrathoracic pressure produces similar changes in the intracardiac and the pericardial pressures. So there is normally a slight variation in the left ventricular stroke volume, which vary with phases of respiration. So during respiration, the increased negative intrathoracic pressure favors an increased venous return to the right heart. However, in constrictive pericarditis, this respiratory variation is exaggerated. Um, So during inspiration, the right ventricle, which would have normally expanded, this expansion is limited. Therefore, to accommodate the increased venous return, there is um, movement of the septum into the left ventricle to accommodate the increased venous return. And this in turn decreases the LV filling and output. Also, the negative interthoracic pressure during inspiration is not fully transmitted to the cardiac chambers. So, the pulmonary veins will have a uh, greater pressure decrease than the LV pressure, which leads to a diminished difference between the left atrial pressures and the pulmonary pressures. So these are the hemodynamic effects that we just went through, and these are the things that cause symptoms of exertional dyspnea, edema, chest discomfort, fatigue, and abdominal symptoms. A closed differential clinically would be a restrictive cardiomyopathy. Here, the pathogenesis is in the myocardium versus the pericardium in constrictive pericarditis. And it is important to distinguish clinically between the two because etiologically, the etiology is different between the two, and etiological workup and treatment will vary between the two. So our patient had normal normal CBC, normal renal function, and liver function test. BBVS was negative. Sputum AFB and expert were also negative. The pleural fluid analysis showed an exudative exudative lymphocytic predominant pleural fluid analysis. On radiology, the chest X-ray was showing pericardial calcification as seen at the base as well as the near the left ventricle, which is also seen on the CT chest as well. The CT thorax abdomen had also shown omental thickening with fat standing, and the echo had showed increased pericardial thickness with septal bounds. So our patient, he underwent ultrasound-guided pleural biopsy and omental biopsy, the reports of which are awaited. He is planned to review with the biopsy reports for initiation on ATT. And he is also planned for pericardectomy at a later date. So our objective from this presentation was to enumerate the clinical findings of constrictive pericarditis and look at the pathophysiology behind these signs. The clinical diagnosis is usually missed, which is why it's important to carefully look for these signs. And the management, what will actually help in relief of symptoms would be a surgical pericardectomy. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. How long is it possible to wait for the pericardectomy?
Depending on the symptoms, right now our particular patient was NYHA 2, so he can NYHA 4. We definitely have to operate immediately, sir. The rest of the recommendations I'll just check, sir.
Any comments? Dr. Audrin is there. Important case to discuss. Thank you, Dr. Jennifer. Any comments from Dr. Audrin or anybody in the house?
Wanted to present. Am I audible? Sorry. Hello. Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, Audrey.
Yeah, we wanted to highlight this case to just show the important clinical findings which need to be looked for in someone we are suspecting pericardial effusion and constrictive pericarditis. In fact, a prominent XY descent and the Kussmaul sign, which Jennifer mentioned, this patient actually had a rare clinical finding of a diastolic apex beat, which is seen in constrictive pericarditis, but is quite a rare finding. There are hardly a couple of case reports of that. And this patient actually had a diastolic apex beat. And the management wise, the diagnosis was actually the first five differential should be TB, especially with someone with a pleural effusion and omental thickening. And we're planning to start ATT as soon as we have the biopsy reports. And surgical management actually is the mainstay for the final treatment is actually the surgical management with pericardectomy. And especially in this patient with such a calcified pericardium, he definitely will require a pericardial pericardectomy. But because he's not as symptomatic for it and currently not in a life-threatening thing, we can actually wait for it till it's clinically stable.
Thank you. Thank you, Audrin and Jennifer.
Audrin.
Yes. Yes.
Audrin, see, he has a calcified pericardium, and that has really altered the functioning of his heart. He's grossly symptomatic. So why have you delaying the pericardectomy? And you kept on saying it's a mainstay of treatment, it cures it. So why are we delaying the pericardectomy? It's only going to get worse.
Yes, yes. We've actually involved thoracic surgery. We planned for it, pericardectomy once we get the biopsy report for this.
Yeah. And the degree of calcification is, I don't know if it is common or uncommon, but it's quite remarkable. So that actually quite stands out. Even on the X-ray, you can see it. So if there are no more comments on this, we'll go ahead to the last case for the day. This is from Medicine 4.